always remember that there are a lot of these right-wing parties pushing some really insane, crazy libertarian ideology. Liz Truss was one of them, and we saw how that crazy economic experiment went, nearly crashing the economy and bankrupting, pensions companies, which could have had a huge ramification of our economy. And I've always said this: if you think what she did was bad, and it was, it could have been oh so much worse if the Bank of England had not stepped in when it did. And yet now, a lot of those crazy right wingers want to remove that autonomy from the Bank of England. Look at Argentina with Milei and doing his crazy economic experiment. Right wingers praise Milei to the hilt, going, "Oh my God, he's so good." Meanwhile, they don't actually talk about all the data, all the stuff that's going on in Argentina that is turning it into an absolute basket case of South America. They don't talk about one of the one of the largest loans in IMF history that Millet has had to take. Don't talk about that. And now, of course, these reform guys that have taken control of councils, and like I say, I have a lot of sympathy for you guys. If you now have a reform council, oh boy, yeah, they've got out their petri dishes, they've got out their Bunsen burners, and oh boy, they haven't got a clue what they are about to do or what they are about to unleash. The grand experiment begins. And hey, when you experiment, things, as in case they will be doing and have been told, they will go incredibly wrong. And when it does, they've only got themselves to blame. But oh, they will blame anyone but themselves. They'll blame the other councillors that aren't reform. They will, I can guarantee you now, end up blaming council workers. Oh, it was the council workers. It was implemented wrongly. The excuses we are going to see is going to be fantastic. But today we're going to have a look over at the Kent bylines because they've done an excellent story highlighting just some of the insane stuff that that Kent's new Reform UK Council is going to do. Get ready. Get ready for this. So, pardon me. Before we begin, as always, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there's the links to the Patreon page, the one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button. And of course, as always, there's the Pony Club down below as well. So let's crack on then into this. So, like I say, coming from, the Kent and Surrey bylines, shall we say, with the title of Be Careful What You Vote For. Reform UK's Kent experiment begins. When are you going to stop the boats then? David Wimble was asked by a constituent, the new Reform UK Limited councillor for Romney Marsh, and he was not able to promise any quick fixes. Unfortunately for Wimble, expectations are high based on the promises made by his party in the election leaflets to, quote, stop the boats, amongst now a welter of other populist pledges. It's May, and many voters had on their minds fixed on protest. And oh boy, this year they really have now excelled themselves, sending political journalists into paroxysms of excitement, with reform now sweeping the board in Kent and elsewhere in the country in local county elections. Normally, of course, sane, sensible political commentators would have been extrapolating from what they are, to be fair, quite extraordinary election results. Reform won control of Kent County Council, and the very long-term incumbents, the Tories, were reduced to 5 councillors, on par with the Greens, losing 57 of the authority's 81 seats. This must be a record for the party that has either run or dominated the council since its inception back since in 1889. And like I say, all these councils that they lost, Always worth highly noting, a lot of these councils that they took, like a lot of those that they took, were exactly like this. Tory councils, where vast majority Tories lost a lot of seats. They've now been put very, very much into a minority on those councils. This is why a lot of the local councillors that lost their seats have been losing their minds over the state of the party. They are vitriolic in many places. Absolutely vitriolic. And I guarantee you now, over on Conservative Home, you are going to see lots of pieces written by local councillors, just as we saw, just as we saw last year when this happened. But back to this. So this will, of course, be a shock to a lot of the council officers who will require a very sharp learning curve now for reform councillors. Their officers are used to accepting a policy network backed up by now underlying political cultures built up after many years of conservative thinkings. The Tory council moved away long ago from one nation Toryism and then embraced Thatcherism in its own imbecile reactionary way, fairly at least early on. Recently, the council has spent its time cutting back, constantly asking voters to pay more for less. The relationship with the Mayor of London and Transport of London has been positively belligerent over ULEZ. Roger Gould's leadership of the council has been tired, fractious, and desperate. With the council now unable to move even forward in a positive way, the trials of 14 years of Tory government has now bogged down the council in a never-ending spiral of council tax increases, service cuts, and deliberate. During his valedictory interview on leaving office, it seemed almost positive in now handing all over the burden to reform. He commented on them, and now the vast problems of adult social care, social education needs, or SEND, and quite, of course, forgetting the poor state of the roads and the collapse in public transport. And this is why I've said before, I want to get on councillors who lost their seats in these areas, because that's the problem Kent was facing. Look at all those problems that they're facing. How are reform going to tackle all those? They just aren't. They are not prepared in the slightest for all this. You can spout populist slogans, everything you want, but the thing is, all these things require knowledge, they require good, well thought out plans. And a lot of these Tory councils tried a lot of the insane, crazy stuff and the ideology they had been pushing. Like I say, they'd moved away from the one nation Toryism. They are going to be in for so much trouble in some of these areas. So from now on, all these complaints will land on the mat of the new leader's office. But before, of course, that can happen, the new Reform Council has to elect a leader and form a cabinet. There are only 6 Reform councillors who have had any experience of local government, and even that is minimal. Far from, of course, hitting the ground running with a team and a plan of action, they will need to find where the office is actually located and where the toilets are in the county hall. They appear to believe that they can just send in the auditors to now open the book and expose all these fraudulent contracts. And we keep on saying this. This is one of the big things you see told about all councils. Oh my God, all these councillors, pocketing it, doing all these, fraudulent contracts. Not going to happen. They will send the auditors and they won't find anything. And it will waste a lot of taxpayers' money. So Nigel Farage obviously threatened a DOGE-lite now for Kent to seek out waste and efficiency, which, based on its American counterpart, is likely to create its own waste and inefficiency rather than reduce it. It is also, I also doubt that the trade unions will kindly sit back and let their members be treated in the same way the US Doge is treating its officials. I don't think they will sit back at all and allow that to happen. I do not think they will allow that at all. And what happens if the union then decides to take the council to court? And then you have to pay out compensation. Again, massive waste of taxpayer money. Massive waste of taxpayer money. Like many individuals who have not actually worked or even run parts of local government, reform councillors simply believe that the councils have always just been badly run and inefficient. And that is unfortunately many people's view of local councils, that they're just, badly run and inefficient. It's not true. That is just the unfortunate, stereotype that gets spread around. As I said before, like all local councillors are just on the take. It's just simply not true. But if they've gone in thinking that it's just all badly run and inefficient, and you solve that, and we can run it better, or we can sort out these inefficiency problems, and it's all going to be golden. No, it's not going to work like that. It's not going to work like that at all. I keep on reinforcing it in you guys. These, like, when the stuff starts to go wrong, and it will, get prepared. Get prepared for some of, like, the insanity we are going to see from this. So, back to this. Some, of course, reform councillors have some small business background. Others are others, of course, with staff, administrative now on a personal level. It is, of course, a paradox that while large parts of East Kent in particular suffer from deprivation, unemployment, and lack of education or training, small businesses cannot get the staff. Why? Because the terms and methods of employment are not attractive to job seekers. It then follows that if the sort of activity is then followed through by the council staff, that staff will then start to leave, and then they will now have a huge shortage in finding replacements. Yep, that is true. If you start to annoy council staff, well, then they'll move to a different council that's not run by reform. It'll be that simple. Accusations of fraud are, of course, not easy to prove and could mean that vital roadworks are then held up because contractors may come to believe that the council is not a reliable business partner. Yep, very true. Why do business with local government or that particular reform local government? Because they're not a reliable partner. How many councillors of these reform people are going to end up being sued because they throw around accusations of fraud? Can't wait to see that. That starts to happen as well. So if I were, of course, the new council, I would seek I would, of course, cease making very unproven allegations and instead, of course, get down to the very hard task of running a multi-million-pound entity. Exactly. And it's all these unproven allegations that they're going to throw around. And it's going to be a disaster. So, the light blue invasion is interesting in that, of course, it mirrors quite closely the Brexit result in Kent. It could be, of course, that many of these same electorate now seeking now to shock the system again. Disruption, of course, might seem a great idea, but Brexit has caused no end of problems, and voting reform and expecting shocks and disruption to deliver public services is now based on hope over experience. And then I love this part. This is why I did this. So what will happen in the next 4 years at the county hall? So there will, of course, be likely rows, defections, and resignations. Reform leader Farage will, of course, be spending his time excusing, expelling, and arguing with various other power bases that reform has now captured. Not everyone will, of course, accept the dictates of Faragism and, of course, its wayward twists and turns. And that, of course, refers to the fact that Farage is going to try and control all these councils from, the Reform Office in London. That is just not going to work. That is madness, thinking that is going to be an idea. Farage's, of course, friendship with Donald Trump and Elon Musk will have consequences. Trump's actions have now left a very unpopular left-of-centre governments being returned with now thumping majorities in Australia and Canada. Why should Britain be any different? Very true. Very true. 4 years is, of course, a long time. Picking fights with Labour government and the Mayor of London will weaken, not strengthen the council. Many of those councillors will wish they were not elected when they find out that they cannot stop the boats or make Kent great again in the short term. Again, very true. In 2017, UKIP took control of Thanet, but by 2021, it was bust beyond recovery. Good point as well. Very good point. With Farage now seemingly more concerned with his US interests, even though that council had far more experienced councillors, it fell by the waysides because of its own contradictions. I'm not sure Reform has learned any from that very bitter experience. They still think there are simple solutions to complex problems. And that will be fascinating to look at into well. If I were a journalist, that's what I'd be looking at. I'd be looking at getting a hold of all those tenant councillors, certainly any of the opposition parties, and say, right, what happened? What happened when UKIP took control? Because there's a clip going around of Emily Mathis recently saying, hold on a second, why aren't we treating Reform the same way we treat UKIP? Why are we treating it as if it's a completely brand new party? It's not. It's just UKIP with a completely different coat. And I think she's right in that. I think she's really right in that. And I think you could very easily tie everything that went wrong in Thanet to Reform. You could absolutely do that. Any problems that UKIP ever had, absolutely, you could tie them to Reform because it's all the same people, all the same outfits, just a different color. So, and of course, this final one. The council was already struggling financially and logistically before this election, and the central government is not going to give them much leeway. Kent should have been devolved and reorganised rather than allowed to struggle on. An unthinking electorate is now setting up the new Reform Council to fail without knowing why. So, what should the Conservatives do? Badenoch is, of course, facing a conundrum. Her instincts now are to steer the Tories into a more rightward direction and cover some or of any of all Reform territory. If she does that, she might, and much of the Conservative voter base might just conclude that the Lib Dems are now the party of Middle England, as has happened in West Kent. And I keep on saying that time and time again. You move right, you'll lose a lot of your voters and your voter base to the Lib Dems. One hope, of course, for her is to stand up now as a Britannia-like figure and fight against the Trump Colossus and try to portray Farage as being a traitor or even unpatriotic. However, her combative behavior and constant references to culture war issues does not unify now a very damaged and fractious parties. The Tories need a healer as much as a fighter, probably even more so. Yeah, I'd agree to that, but there's no healer because Robert Jenrick, who is going to be leader within the next year or so, he's even more to the right of Kemi Badenoch. So, Labour is currently falling under a false illusion. Labour, of course, did not hit the ground running. Neither, pardon me, neither have they offered change of the sort that the nation wanted. And they've received now an outright royal raspberry now in return. Pardon me. Labour is asking the public to be patient. And it is true that the electorate, there we go, always, of course, want done things at pace. But something positive ought to be shown at least by now. The sort of changes made on taxation, OAP, cold weather payments, disability benefits reform are not positive in nature. And in some cases, they seem misjudged, misery, and mean. It is all very well to complain that there is no money, but that was true back in 1945 after VE Day, when the financial situation was now immeasurably worse. Fear over being seen as Trust 2.0 is now taking Labour's financial conservatism too far. There are things that are now very easily, quickly to win, and they could be done now, such as creating a mutually owned infrastructure and investment corporation to get control over the water and energy companies. This could be introduced and placed now on the slipway for launching. Again, yeah, that could be done very well, very quickly. The deadwood now in government could, of course, be reshuffled out of government in a reshuffle at now the earliest opportunity. Saying we are listening and now plying on regardless is, of course, what the Tories did, and what did that get them? Standing up to Trump, of course, will not harm the government, and any illusions about any kind of trade deal are just that, illusionary. More on that maybe tomorrow, because apparently Trump is going to announce that they've got this trade deal. And as I've said, when you've listened to the British side on this, they've not said trade deal. I think what has been signed is a memorandum of understanding that is basically going to be meaningless, but it's being put forward by us as it's an economic prosperity deal. When in reality, it's a memorandum of understanding. But of course, Trump can't tell the difference because, well, he's an idiot. We, of course, should remain very friendly to the US, but be prepared for the worst by cleaving to Europe. As our nearest and greatest trading partner, Trump is, of course, Farage's very weak point, even now within his own supporters. So, from shouting now to showing up, the Reform's reckoning is now here, and oh boy, is it. For all the sound and the fury of these elections, they are just the battle now in an ongoing campaign. For Labour, of course, delivery is key. Better deliver up a better Britain, and even grievances against immigration might not seem so potent. For the Conservatives, the hard choices have to be made, in which means now adopting a very different leadership style. But after two seriously bad elections, it will take time and some healing. For Reform, the buck stops here. And for now, they are up to their necks in it. No more carping from the sidelines. They have to deliver. And who knows, amongst all these newbie councillors, maybe some talents might arise. I hope so for their sake. Otherwise, it will be a disaster, even which Farage cannot laugh off. And oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, are they going to be in trouble. Like I say, just some of this stuff here. Just some of this stuff going on here is crazy, but it is not going to go well for them. It is not going to go well for them, and that's just going on in Kent. What's it going to be like in Doncaster, or North Lancashire, or Nottingham? Sorry, Nottinghamshire. Sorry, gotta get that right, because there's Nottingham and Nottinghamshire when it comes to councils. So yeah, the disasters, honestly, are just going to be waiting to unfold. And it's just now sit back and wait for them to roll in. So as always, let me know what you think about this. Are you living under one of these new reform councils? And I'd love to know what your actions you are taking to try and hold these people to account. Because again, I'd love to hear from you guys what you think and what you are doing about this stuff. So as always, let me know what you think. Put it down in the comments. Remember to click the like and share button before you go. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.